5 days after giving birth, I stood on the porch of the only home my newborn son had ever known, staring at a massive sold sign plastered across the front door. The locks were changed. The windows were dark. My husband was gone, having cleaned out every single cent from our bank accounts before running off with his mistress. I was completely abandoned, left with nothing but the hospital blanket wrapped around my baby and my grandmother's wedding ring on my finger. Out of pure desperation, I traded that ring for a train ticket back to my hometown. But at the station, a strange encounter changed everything. I used my absolute last dollar to buy a ticket for a stranded, forgotten old man. I thought it was just a final act of kindness before my life completely collapsed. But 2 weeks later, a gleaming black limousine pulled up outside my parents' house, and the driver called my name. My name is Clara. I am 27 years old, and 5 days ago, I experienced the greatest joy of my life, followed immediately by a betrayal that completely shattered my world. I was discharging from the hospital after a grueling 48-hour labor, holding my beautiful newborn son, Leo, tightly against my chest. My body was exhausted, but my heart was full as the taxi pulled up to the suburban house my husband, Julian, and I had bought 2 years ago. I expected to see welcome balloons, or at least a porch light left on. Instead, the front lawn was empty, and the house stood completely dark under the late afternoon shadows. When I stepped out of the taxi, a cold dread gripped my stomach. Plastered squarely across the front door was a massive, bright red sign that read, "Sold." Fumbling with my keys while balancing Leo, I tried to unlock the door, but the key wouldn't even turn. The locks had been completely changed. Panic surged through me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Julian's number, only to receive a sterile, automated recording. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." "Clara?" a voice called out. I turned around to see our next-door neighbor, Martha, walking quickly across the lawn, her face tight with worry. "Oh, thank goodness you're back. I've been trying to reach you, but Julian said you changed your number." "Martha, what is happening?" I asked, my voice trembling as Leo stirred in my arms. "Why is there a sold sign on my house?" Martha looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "Clara, I am so sorry. Julian packed up a moving truck 3 days ago. There was a young blonde woman with him, helping him load the boxes. He told everyone the house sold in a private cash deal and that you two were relocating for his business. He took everything." The world seemed to spin beneath my feet. I collapsed onto the porch step, holding my baby as tears blurred my vision. I immediately logged into my mobile banking app, my hands shaking so violently I could barely type the password. When the screen loaded, my heart dropped into absolute freefall. Our joint savings account, the college fund we had started for Leo, and even our everyday checking account had been completely drained. The balance read exactly $0. Julian hadn't just left me. He had systematically erased our life together, running off with his secret mistress and leaving his 27-year-old wife and 5-day-old son entirely homeless, penniless, and abandoned on the street. I stood on that cold porch for what felt like hours, the reality of my situation settling into my bones like ice. I had no money, no home, and a 5-day-old infant who depended entirely on me. My parents lived 300 miles away in a small farming town, and with my phone service about to be cut off, I knew I had to get to them immediately. I walked down the street, my body aching from childbirth, carrying Leo in a cheap plastic car seat Martha had lent me. My destination was a small, dimly lit pawn shop 3 blocks away. Inside the shop, the air smelled of old metal and dust. The man behind the counter looked at me with cold indifference as I placed my final valuable possession on the glass, my grandmother's vintage gold wedding ring. It was the only thing Julian hadn't managed to steal. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The pawnbroker inspected it carelessly. $50. It was worth 10 times that, but I didn't have the luxury of negotiating. I nodded, took the crumpled bills, and walked straight to the city's bustling train station. The station was loud, chaotic, and freezing. I bought a one-way ticket to my parents' town, leaving me with exactly a single $5 bill in my pocket, my absolute last dollar. As I sat on a bench waiting for my platform to be called, I noticed a commotion near the ticket counter. An elderly man, dressed in a faded, oversized tweed coat that had seen better decades, was pleading with the ticket agent. His white hair was messy, his hands were trembling, and he looked completely lost. "Please, son," the old man said, his voice fragile. "My daughter is sick, and I just need to get on this train. I'm only $4 short." The agent didn't even look up from his computer screen. "Next in line. No ticket, no ride, old man. Step aside." The elderly man took a step back, looking defeated and utterly invisible to the crowd rushing past him. Watching him, a sharp pain hit my chest. I knew exactly what it felt like to be completely cast aside and abandoned by the world. Clutching Leo tightly against my chest, I stood up from the bench and walked over to the counter before the old man could wander away into the freezing night. My own heart was heavy with despair, but seeing his hopeless expression made my own pain take a back seat. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill, the absolute last piece of money I had to my name. "Here," I said, stepping up beside him and handing the bill to the stone-faced ticket agent. "Put it toward his ticket, please." The agent blinked in surprise, took the money, and finally printed out the ticket, sliding it across the counter. The elderly man stared at the paper, then turned his gaze to me, his eyes shining with sudden, deep emotion. "Young lady, you shouldn't have done that," he murmured, noticing my exhausted appearance and the tiny baby wrapped in my arms. "You look like you need that money far more than I do." "We both need a way home tonight," I replied with a faint, tired smile. "I couldn't just leave you stranded." As fate would have it, we ended up boarding the exact same train. The car was warm, and the steady click-clack of the tracks finally lulled Leo into a peaceful sleep. The old man took the empty seat across the aisle from me. For the next 2 hours, as the dark countryside rushed past our window, we talked. He introduced himself simply as Arthur. He was a gentle listener, and before I realized what I was doing, the dam broke. I found myself pouring my heart out to this complete stranger. I told him about Julian's sudden betrayal, the sold sign on my porch, the completely drained bank accounts, and the terrifying uncertainty of how I was going to raise my son alone. Arthur listened intently, never once interrupting. His weathered face was filled with a profound, quiet compassion that I hadn't received from anyone else. When the conductor finally announced my stop, I gathered Leo's things to leave. Arthur stood up, looked me directly in the eyes, and took my hand. "Thank you for your name, Clara," he said softly, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. "Never forget that true kindness is a rare currency, and it is never, ever wasted. Safe travels." Stepping off the train and into the crisp night air of my hometown felt like entering a different reality. My parents were waiting for me at the platform, their faces falling the moment they saw my hollow cheeks and the cheap plastic car seat holding Leo. There were no words needed. My mother simply wrapped her arms around us, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry freely. They brought me back to the modest, weathered farmhouse where I had grown up, a place completely untouched by the polished, deceptive lifestyle Julian had built for us in the city. The next 2 weeks were a blur of exhausting survival and quiet desperation. While my mother helped watch Leo, I spent every waking hour sitting at the kitchen table, furiously filling out entry-level job applications on an old laptop. I applied for retail positions, reception work, and night shift cleaning jobs, anything that could bring in a steady income. But the emotional trauma of the betrayal hung over me like a dark, suffocating fog. Every time I looked at Leo's innocent, sleeping face, a wave of intense anxiety washed over me. How was I going to afford his medical checkups? How would I buy diapers, formula, or clothes as he grew? My phone was filled with terrifying notifications from collection agencies. Julian had not only drained our joint accounts, but he had also opened credit cards in my name, saddling me with thousands of dollars in debt before vanishing completely. My credit was ruined, my confidence was shattered, and my future felt entirely non-existent. I felt like an absolute failure at 27, relying on my aging parents' meager retirement savings just to put food on the table for my son. I kept thinking back to the warm suburban home we used to own, wondering how a person I loved could transform into such a heartless monster overnight. The days blended into one long, agonizing question mark, and I lay awake every single night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I would ever find the strength to rebuild our shattered lives from rock bottom. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, exactly 14 days after I had stepped off that train, when the monotony of our quiet rural life was shattered. I was standing at the kitchen window, rocking a fussy Leo against my shoulder, when the distinct sound of a powerful engine echoing down our gravel driveway caught my attention. I looked out, expecting to see a delivery truck or perhaps a neighbor's tractor. Instead, my jaw dropped. Smoothly navigating the dusty, unpaved road leading to our modest farmhouse was a massive, pristine black limousine. Its tinted windows glittered sharply under the afternoon sun, looking completely alien against the backdrop of overgrown fields and weathered barns. The vehicle came to a gentle stop right in front of our porch, kicking up a small cloud of dust that quickly settled around its polished chrome tires. My mother hurried out from the hallway, her eyes wide with confusion. "Clara, who on earth is that? Are you expecting someone?" "No," I whispered, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. A wave of intense anxiety washed over me. Had Julian found out where I was? Was this some new legal nightmare sent by his lawyers to take Leo away from me? Before I could spiral further, the rear door remained firmly closed, but the front door opened. A chauffeur dressed in a flawless, charcoal gray suit and crisp white gloves stepped out. He adjusted his cap, closed his door with a solid, expensive thud, and walked purposefully up the wooden steps of our porch. He stopped a few feet away from where my mother and I stood frozen, his expression completely professional, yet remarkably polite. He looked directly at me, inclined his head in a respectful nod, and spoke with absolute clarity. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Ms. Clara Vance Morrison?" He used my full maiden name, a name I hadn't used since the day I married Julian. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly as I tightened my grip on Leo. "I'm Clara." The chauffeur reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thick, elegant envelope made of heavy, cream-colored paper, sealed with a distinct wax stamp. He held it out to me. "My employer requested that I deliver this to you personally, ma'am. He also requested the honor of your company. If you are willing, he is waiting for you inside the vehicle." With the envelope trembling in my hand, I exchanged a bewildered look with my mother. She gently took Leo from my arms, giving me a reassuring nod. I walked down the porch steps, my heart pounding against my ribs, and approached the limousine. The chauffeur smoothly opened the heavy rear door for me. I stepped inside the luxurious, leather-scented interior, and as my eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, I gasped. Sitting across from me was the stranded old man from the train station. Gone was the faded, oversized tweed coat and the air of defeat. Instead, he wore a tailored, custom-made three-piece suit, his white hair neatly styled, and his sharp blue eyes full of life. "Hello again, Clara," he said, a warm, familiar smile spreading across his face. "Arthur?" I breathed, utterly stunned. "What is all this? Who are you?" He chuckled softly, gesturing for me to sit on the plush leather seat opposite him. "My full name is Arthur Vance, Clara. I am the chairman of Vance Global Enterprises. 2 weeks ago, I was traveling incognito, testing the waters of human kindness, as I occasionally do. I purposely left myself short on funds at that chaotic station. Dozens of wealthy individuals pushed past me, ignoring a desperate old man. But you, a young mother who had just lost absolutely everything, used your very last dollar to save me." Arthur reached down, lifted a thick manila folder from the small table between us, and slid it toward me. "I told you that true kindness is never wasted. The moment I got off that train, I put my private security team and corporate lawyers to work. We investigated your husband, Julian." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the legal documents inside. "What did you do?" I whispered. "Julian thought he was clever," Arthur explained, his voice turning cold and commanding. "He sold your home in a rush cash deal to an investment firm that, as it turns out, is a minor subsidiary of my own conglomerate. I have canceled the sale entirely. The home is now legally bought out, the deed restructured, and the property has been transferred exclusively and permanently into your name, free of any debt. Furthermore, my legal team discovered his hidden corporate assets and systematically acquired his entire business partnership, effectively freezing him out of his own industry. I stared at the paperwork, tears of pure relief spilling over my cheeks. The nightmare was finally over. The final pages in the folder detailed the ultimate, poetic justice, Julian's sudden financial ruin. Because Arthur's conglomerate had acquired the business partnership, Julian's fraudulent debts were exposed to his creditors, leaving him and his mistress completely broke and facing immediate legal consequences. Meanwhile, Arthur had established a massive, protected financial trust fund for Leo, ensuring my son's education and future were secure for the rest of his life. The very next week, I moved back into my beautiful suburban home, walking past the empty front lawn where the red sold sign had once stood. The locks were new, the windows were bright with sunlight, and the house felt like a sanctuary again. I spent my days focusing on raising Leo, completely free from the suffocating cloud of debt and fear that Julian had tried to trap me in. I often looked down at my hands, realizing that while I had lost my grandmother's gold wedding ring, I had gained a priceless lease on life simply by choosing empathy on the darkest night of my existence. I had been given the ultimate power to rebuild, proving that heartless monsters never truly win in the end. Now, I am incredibly curious about all of you who have followed my journey until the very end. What would you have done if you were standing in my shoes at that freezing train station? Would you have spent your absolute last dollar on a complete stranger? Please comment the city you are watching from right now so I can see exactly how far my story of survival and justice has reached. Thank you so much for watching.